I'm talking when I kind of wanted to die because I know my mom would be really upset with me getting myself in this stupid situation. Because I had called her 2 days earlier, Christmas morning, whatever it was, and then that 2 days later I snuck up on that North Vietnamese soldier.
Could you tell us about that story?
But I woke my mom up in Lindebus at 9 o'clock in the morning, and Mom, it's your son, Philip, John Philip. Over, say over, Mom, say over. And she repeated everything. She was crying, and I was crying. And I know I told her I had a job with the mail. Don't worry about me, I'm safe. I'm doing the laundry for all the guys. And she knew I wasn't telling the truth. But 2 days later, it was my time to walk point. Every 4 day, 4 platoons, they have a point man, and I guess I got selected to walk. And you hear voices up in front. They were Vietnamese voices, and I think I could see, I put our squad on hold, and I moved where I could see who was talking on a bunker. I snuck around some bamboo, and he was talking to some people on the side. Had I walked our squad, we would have got blown away. But anyway, I just felt led to sneak up behind this guy. I got his attention, and you whisper, you telegram these short prayers. God, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I don't want to shoot him. He's got a family that loves him. What do I do? Well, anyway, I got his attention, and I said, Chu Hoi, that's open arms or surrender. And I got him to come down. You go like this, Vietnamese. We go like this, America. But I got him to come down off the bunker, and I ran down, because those 2 people who were in the side, they must have taken off, or they weren't there, or they witnessed what happened. But I ran down and grabbed him, threw him on my shoulder, I carried him back up to our squad and kind of watched over him, afraid maybe one of our soldiers would come and shoot him. But we did the Vietnamese squat, and he had pictures of his mother and his family members. I had pictures of my mom and sister, and we shared them with each other, and we just started crying that we have families back in the world that love us, and are we ever coming back home? And I think he had a weaving of a belt that his mother had made. They wear something that someone in their family had made for them to think of home all the time. And why the heck were we there? It was like something they thought up in the Tonkin Gulf, where I heard, was it Ho Chi Minh had an audience with John F. Kennedy. He said, don't send your kids 10,000 miles, your young men, where they will get killed, and their mothers aren't here to bury them, because we defeated the French. And Kennedy didn't want to go to war, but then the government takes him out. And we did something false to start the war. I heard that from Admiral Stockdale. He was the highest ranking POW. Got the Medal of Honor. He lived in Coronado. I used to visit him and his wife. Sybil Stockdale and George Day, wife Doris Day, not the movie star, they went around the country and got, their husbands were POW. They had a voice for Ronald Reagan, get our people back home. And they were their voice helped get the POWs back home.
This gentleman that you went up on from behind, then you end up sharing pictures with. This was on Christmas Day, and then did you have a reunion with him?
Yeah, about 8 of us went back to North Vietnam, an organization called Vietnam Restoration Project out of Santa Rosa, California, Northern California. They had built a clinic somewhere in the South. They raised money, and my friend Art James was working he was a Martinsburg VA hospital vet rep, and he got tired of working with the post office and helped guys out with PTSD, and a couple guys come in the office with hand grenades, and he'd talk them out, and they were going to take their life, and Art would try to calm them down. They were stressed out from the war. But Ada, he got a notice their group was going back to Vietnam. Well, Art, if you go back, I'll go back with you. So Art and I went back. It was September and October. We worked 6 weeks south of Hanoi, Long Province, with former North Vietnamese soldiers and their family. And some of these soldiers had no arms. And we worked alongside them. And we had an interpreter, and that fella who I had taken alive, he was there, and we just communicated through an interpreter, and just a beautiful reconnection all those years. And then we had an audience with the second head of the Communist Party, a female lady in Hanoi, and she said, what you're doing is, we love you for coming back, rebuilding what was destroyed. We probably killed hundreds of thousands of people, the Christmas bombing of the North of 1972. Just dropped bombs all over. I met some B-52 pilots years ago, and they are just haunted, never knowing how many people they have killed from the bombs up above, you know. And all those that you try to erase those memory and to see it for forgetfulness, but they're always there. And they're important to be there, and you can talk about them.
How important do you think it is to talk about these stories, to release them?
Because some of the kids you meet at a school, they say, my grandpa was over there, or my great uncle, or they never talk about anything. And well, when a day comes up, Veterans Day, Memorial Day or something, you just spend some time with them and touch them and surprise them with the hug, and Grandpa, I love you. You know, and they'll melt, they'll break down. And if you ever want to talk to me about Vietnam, I'll listen, and they'll open up maybe. Let's see, I got in country to mid-July 1969, and then how I was led to Art James. We just see everybody sitting kind of alone with getting their meals at a fire base wherever we were assigned to, or before we went out in the bush to a fire base. I think it was LZ Grant by the Black Virgin Mountain in Tay Ninh area, Nui Bao Den, or the Black Virgin Mountain, which you could see anywhere almost in southern Vietnam. But I end up sitting next to Art James eating our meal. That's how we connected and stay connected after all these years. But there was the brothers, the soul brothers, the Black Americans. We had one guy, he screamed out, us new guys in country, Hobo is his name, because he hopped on the freight trains across country. And we call them the soul brothers. And he said, forget everything you learn your 4 months or 16 weeks of basic training. We got 5 days to show you how to stay alive here in the jungle. And they showed us what the punji pits and just the bamboo, how they would set up in 3-man formation. And then I ended up becoming a assistant gunner to a fella, a soul brother named Fragman was his nickname. He carried a dozen hand grenades, and I'm crawling on the ground. He's pulling me because I have his rounds for a 90 recoilless rifle that shot out little 3,000 darts or something little into the wood line, keep our company from being overrun. And if a grenade came by near where I was at, or him, out in the Fragman's body was laying right on top of mine, protecting me. So the blacks and the Mexican and the whites, I grew up in the projects back in Dorchester, Columbia Point, 15 Brandon Avenue, I remember, with my sisters and my mom, and we just all got along. We dug the foxholes together. Oh, Fragman, when we were, after 30 or 40 days out in the bush, we had seen firefights, some people wounded, some people killed. Then we come 5 days to the fire base, maybe LZ Grant, guard duty, nighttime, and we get to rest. We get hot meals finally, but the fragman's walking the perimeter, keep checking on how we're doing, and Colonel would come by. Fragman, how's it going? He said, and Fragman's motto was, don't calls me Jesse, don't calls me James, calls me Fragman because it earns my name fighting Whitey in the Watts riots. And we had another fellow named Teddy Bear from Baltimore, and us new guys for a week, we were so exhausted after humping through the boonies all day long. Teddy was there digging the foxhole for us, and I said, okay, you guys get in there and start digging now. So they broke us in. We all got along together, and now you got the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa. It's the people on the bullhorns that are hidden in the background that stir up the crowds. And they always reminded me of the clerks in the rear that got our packages from home, or banana loaf bread. People on the East Coast like sending the pumpkin bread with raisins and walnut bread. And the clerks would open them up and take what they thought belonged to them when nothing belonged to them. And maybe we get melted Heath or Baby Ruth, Baby Finger candy bars or broken peanut butter cookies. But sometimes we got our loaf and then the letter. If they took anything out, they took the letter from home from our family. And some of those clerks, they saw their name on a document to go out. They were needed out in the bush, and they would erase their name, put somebody else's name, and that sometimes that other person was killed or maimed for life. And I read years later, they carried that bad dreams. Those clerks went and found the families and made amends, and I was the one that should have been there, not your son. And I remember right before a couple days or whatever, a week or two, I walked up, my turn to walk point, maybe it was latter part of January, I walked up on a little Loach helicopter. It was a two-man helicopter that they would fly over the wood line to draw fire from down below. Then the Cobra gunships, a pair of them would be behind shooting, but there was two young lieutenants that were shot down and killed. And I saw them and I just lost it. And I went back and crying, and I got the lieutenant up there, and I keep thinking this time of the year, I wish I would have got the information on them, because I probably would have met their moms and dads or families at the Vietnam Memorial dedication, and it never worked out. But I was there, I just got a job working, I hadn't got on with the post office, and I think I was living with Art James and the family, Weston, Maryland, but I was there for the dedication. We were there November of '82, and we met these mothers, the Gold Star moms. I met Sarah Saunders and Janet Frank, and they met there. Janet came from Laguna Niguel, Sarah came from Arizona. They hung out. They all had this hats or jackets, and a bunch of us were hang out from a couple hundred feet away from, follow them for hours as the Gold Star parents, moms and dads, gathered together, showed each their son's names on the panel. And we just followed them, and they kept looking, Janet Franks kept looking back at us, making sure we were there. And then they wondered, when do you think how do we approach them? They'll know when it's time for us to be with them. So we just stayed with them a whole day, and then eventually the moms, half a dozen moms, turned around, the young men, come here, and they showed us their sons' names, and because we're all weeping, and they said, you're going to be our boys for the next couple days. And we went to Alan Cranston's office. He was the head of the Veterans Affairs Congress, a couple of the moms. Alan comes out of his office with index cards to read a message to them, and I took it out of his hand. Let these mothers say something to you. And I get bothered. This is tough. come Veterans Day or Memorial Day, you got all these generals and admirals with all their stars. They've got no wounds, they got no scars. They don't know what it's like, the feel of hot metal as if it's on fire, burning through their flesh and bone, being an eyewitness to their own arm or leg being severed from their body. They'll be speaking all over the country. They have the same message, it's memorized. They don't never talk on the horrors of war because they haven't been there. Colin Powell, Norman Schwarzkopf, Peter Pace, Krulak, General Krulak, they were lieutenants and platoon leaders, captain. They were in the jungles and the firefights with the combat vets, so they have a right, and they become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And if anybody's going to talk on up here, Memorial, get a Vietnam combat nurse, because they've seen more death and dying in their hospital room. Or get an amputee to speak. I send money every 3 months to an organization, Homes for Our Troops in Massachusetts, in Braintree, Mass, I think. Well, anyway, I get a nice personal letter thanking, because that money goes, when they get enough money, they build special adaptive homes, paralyzed and amputee vets. And one fellow, Bobby McCardle, and his wife Steph, used to visit him at Balboa. They had to take his leg off, and he ended up traveling the country with the amputee softball team. You know, and then it was December, they just built a home for him in Wisconsin, and they were going to fly me back there, but my back wasn't doing good. But I was so happy that I got to be a part, and Stephanie, his wife, would be at his hospital room 24 hours a day. And they come and visit me up in Julian, and they got 2 kids, Taylor and Chase. But they remember our visits, and weekends I'd surprise the guys on the 2nd floor, which was the intensive care unit, where I spend a lot of time at Balboa, but now it was the recovery unit. And I'd surprise them banging on their door. I said, "Oh, wow, Baca." And then you hear from them later, "You don't know what your visits meant to us," because they were so depressed and taking so many meds, and some even had suicide thoughts. And you just interrupt them at the right time. You just felt led there. And I always share with these, I'll end just by saying, I love the Snowball Express families, the children who lost their moms and dads in Iraq and Afghanistan. They don't know whatever happened to their moms or their dads. And I get to be involved. They haven't had it for 2 years. We leave out of LA. Monsoon got me turned on to it, and another fella, Greg Young. And then Gary Sinise took it over a couple years ago. And American Airlines flies them because they've lost some pilots and who had families in America. So we need to find these families who lost their dads overseas. But I share with them, the kids, my beautiful dying moments. The grenade came in, it landed near Art, and I pushed him out of the way. It was right, the stars were, I saw more stars I've ever seen in my life. But time kind of stopped. Everything was slow motion, like my whole life flashed before me in a moment's time. And then I saw my mom and my sisters. It's like you try to reach out and grab them, but they disappear. And then the only thing you think about running, it's gonna blow up, or I might get paralyzed, get wounded in the back, or do I pick it up, throw it, it might blow my arm off, or somebody's gonna get wounded. But I just thought about, I took my helmet off and put it under my stomach, and I said, "Dear Jesus, forgive me for everything I've ever done wrong." And then it was like slow motion falling on, and then when it blew up, I wasn't sure if my legs were there, but I saw the intestines coming out, but I had no pain. And my Lieutenant John Dotson yanked me by a tree, and he was sitting next to me. He lives in Springfield, Virginia, retired a colonel, and he lay alongside me, removing all the burning metal and washing out my intestines. And you remember that, it's a beautiful love story. I'll remind him February 10th, don't tell nobody you're from California, they're gonna think we're married. And he just says, it's just one of those bad nights in Vietnam, but but you loved me, you kept me from dying. And I always had a Bible, an old, I was raised a Catholic, was an altar boy when everything was in Latin and the masses, and I started reading. I met an old man in Linda Vista. He told me about Jesus coming back. So I never heard of that. I never heard that in the Catholic Church. And I started reading, gave me a Bible. I started reading the gospel about the life of Jesus, and then I confront the priest, because I was their custodian and gardener, and some of them be tipping the wine. I says, you know, what Jesus teaches in the Bible, you don't teach to your people and your millions of Catholics in the church. You teach about worshiping Mary and saints, and it's false. And they kicked me out, which is wonderful. But anyway, I had the Bible. That was my body armor, different pockets and now it's on. It was every unit I was at the hospital for recovery. It followed me. They made sure it was with. Now it's on display at the Medal of Honor Museum at Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, in the Yorktown, and that's where I want my Medal of Honor to be, next to my Bible, when it's my time. But how we all got along together in we had a fella from Hawaii, we called him Pineapple. We had one guy, he looked like a Neanderthal man. We called him Link, and he was in between Neanderthal and. But we all, the blacks and whites and the Chicanos, we were together in the life and death combat. We got along. Now they can't even get along out here in our country. It's so sad. And I had like Dr. Guzik, Jim Guzik. He passed away, I think, December 31st, 2 years ago. But he was my surgeon, and when I had complications, I'd start hemorrhaging, and then of course they'd make contact with him, and he would get me well again. And then Nurse Angie, in charge of the nurses and the corpsmen, and she was like a mother to me, always coming and stealing my puzzle pieces, and she knew how to get me out of bed after so many months in bed. And then I meet Sandy Goodman, and she connects with me through Monsoon, and Sandy and I would go to church when I was able enough and sit together and do our altar calls, resurrender our life to the Lord, and just let me know I was a light in a dark world, and letting me know being sexually violated. And they live with that, all nightmares. They think about suicide. And if there's 22 or more a day committing suicide, at least a third of them are women from being molested. So sad. But cookies and pizza?
Cookies and grilled cheese.
That's nice, the different people that come up and visit.
Yeah.
I was up here last time with Rob, well, I need to come up again and fly the kite, but a couple years ago I was up here and I met a Russian submarine commander. And I gave him a coin, and he was a Russian submarine commander during World War II. And there was, I loved, my best jobs I ever had was working at Whitetail Ski Resort, Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, $6 an hour. But I worked on the high-speed quad, screaming and yelling at people, going back and forth. Single grandmother, single grandpa, come, get together, get to know each other on the lift.
I like it.
And if there's four sit on this chair here, ladies in front, or they tell them I'm a model for Vogue. Okay, rich lawyers come and ride with these models. But then, I met a Jürgen Pauli. Jürgen Pauli lived in DC area. He was a Japanese sub-commander for Hitler. He left the country. He didn't like Hitler. He became an American pilot, submarine commander. But he owned a boutique or somewhere in DC or Georgetown. He had all these beautiful women. He was a ski instructor, and he says, you're not going to learn. The women, they listen. I said, I guess you're right. But I did learn how to snowboard, and seizures from the wounds. I'd have them in the hospital bed and wake up, my arms are tied to the bed rail. And then I go for years without having, you have the grand mal seizure. And I go for years without having, all of a sudden, some would come up and years go by, and then I had lived in Julian, moving from Pacific Beach in an apartment, visited some friends up in Julian, and one fella knew a friend. He was a retired Navy SEAL, Carl Swepson. He was in the early 60s, Vietnam, but he had a friend who had a house for rent, old 100-year-old house, but it had a wood stove, and it was nice splitting wood, and then maybe had been there a little while, and then some lady had some standard poodles, and I said, well, I had a white one when I lived back east for 12 years. So I ended up getting one, and I named him Jojo, and I put up a fence in the yard, and third or fourth day I had him, he was scared to death of me, I think, because of the hat. He probably, whoever had him would hit him with the baseball hat. But I put up the last post, and I had a seizure, and I woke up, and Jojo was laying right on my chest. And so when I would get the oars through the years after having him for 12 years, tomorrow will be the second anniversary that I had to put him to sleep. John and Jojo. And but he loved, everybody loved him. Snowfall, a deer would come down in the driveway and they'd almost touch noses, you know, the fence dividing it. And he'd always dig in the gopher holes, bring a live gopher, jump on the bed, Jojo! And he just wanted a playmate. He wouldn't hurt him. And then the two cats, Jose and Jose B, they got along together. But yeah, and you see these videos with all the being reunited with their service dog, because you couldn't take the dogs back from out of country back home. But I do have a beautiful daughter, Megan, lives in Marblehead, and she moved from Everett, her and her mom. I stay in touch, I help her out every month. And little Louise, 13 years old, she's about 14 months old, October 5th. And she's got more hair than, almost not as quite as long as yours. She's got all this, and she walks around with a brush all the time. And Megan's dog, a full-grown collie, I think named Logan, follows her everywhere she goes. And then I got a picture they had 2 feet of snow back there, and little Louise is standing in these big giant snow boots, you know, just standing up. But I got to see her for the first time back in July.
Nice.
We looked at each other, and she cried and I cried, and then Megan said, Dad, you gotta feed her. So I fed her yogurt and oatmeal, and she was happy, and I'd crawl on the floor, and she's trying to jump all over me, and I'm crying. So the joy of my life, my daughter and my granddaughter, and a good relationship with her mom. And I guess Monsoon, he's my best friend, and of course he's got his medical issues all the time, but he was there when I put Jojo to sleep, and I'll be with him when he has to put Cooper to sleep. Mary, the vet, we went to her naturalization from Toronto, and a couple years ago at LA Convention Center, and she always gave us great deals when they had to do work on the dogs. And she mentioned people's emotions override the dog's suffering, and they spend thousands of dollars to keep the dog alive when they should be put to sleep, the hardest thing in the world. But and then I had Jojo in the audience. 4,000 or 5,000 people are getting naturalized. The judge calls him up. He was a Korean judge, and he was he tell a story about his life, his parents coming over from the Korean War or something. But Jojo's all groomed and trimmed, and he's got the service vest on. And is that a French poodle? Uh-huh. Is he gonna get naturalized? I'm waiting for the judge to call him up, and he'll be, Jojo, come on up, Jojo Baca. He'll be an American poodle. Oh wow, that's great. But he always liked, when we'd walk up in Julian, visit the neighborhood, he'd lead the pack holding a stuffed toy. And he always liked to visit Velta, Jimmy and Velta. Velta knows I'm coming up. She's 90 years old. 9/11 was her birthday. She sat on that day, but if she knows I'm gonna visit her, she'll make honey cornbread and Mickey Mouse waffles. She's got a Mickey Mouse waffle machine. And that was JoJo's favorite place, because they had 2 golden retrievers, and when Jimmy passed away 5 years ago at the end of March, his retrievers passed away within a week's time. You know,
Broken heart.
I haven't seen her for a couple weeks. We were together up on Veterans Day. We were back, they had a tent up here where they were filming everything in auto video, and we had some shade, and they had a nice write-up in the paper. The lady who wrote it was really surprised me, and that somebody sent it to me, and I sent it to different people, and they liked it. But I'm waiting for my niece to go back with her on the weekends, because I loved visiting her. My niece is big, she can move or pick her up. And she, Uncle John, Angie's still in bed, it's 1 o'clock. Well, let me come over and I'll touch her feet and stroke her forehead, and Angie will slowly open her eyes and whisper my name. Then Anna gets her up, I help her, and we would bring her to the chair and help her eat, and go through some of her old black and white photos when she was in uniform, going back 50 years ago or beyond that, from the University of Nebraska. And every Saturday, I know I'll be over to, we'll watch the Cornhuskers together. And
Sweet.
but before I would leave, she'd always want me to read from her mother's giant Bible. You know, read the Psalms or some of the epistles, the gospel, some of the Gospel of John. And she always had a smile on my face, looking at me with a smile. You remember those people that loved you, and all the people I used to party with in Linda Vista, when we used to get loaded and everything. I spent a year almost at Balboa Hospital. None of those party people ever came to visit, just the people who were in Vietnam. One had lost his leg, and they would come to visit often, which was nice. Oh, and I adopted Grandma Beatrice Vinquist. She'd always make, from Norway, she'd always make her Swedish pancakes. Her husband, Ernst, he was in the Swedish Horse Cavalry in World War I in France, 1914. We played checkers. Ernst, I got to go to the bathroom. Okay, John. And he'd move the checkers around. He'd always cheat me. Did I move? That's your John move, or your move, John. But they always loved going to the Swedish smorgasbord restaurants when it was all you could eat for less than $2. And I always got to drive their 65 Mustang, you know. That was nice. Oh, I don't speak much out of high school, but or they asked, what do you think we should do? Put the phones away and go visit senior citizens or veterans, find out where they're at nursing homes. They're all forgotten about. When I would bring Jojo in a classroom, he said, what kind of service dog is that? He looks for people who are on their cell phones when they're not paying attention to their teacher, and they drop their cell phone. And I said, I would take Jojo to a nursing home when Nurse Angie would fall, fractured her hip. And he'd see some lone person in a wheelchair down the hallway. He'd pull me over to them and just put his head on their lap. And your young generation, go visit the forgotten seniors, elderly people. More than anything, they would love that. And they'll want you, are you coming back again? And you'll be back.
Mingle.
Yeah, when we, like our Medal of Honor gatherings, try to get the younger guys to break away from their group and sit with we had Joe Jackson and his wife Rose. She was, Joe was in the Korean War, but he got his medal for the Vietnam War in the Air Force. Him and his wife Rose were married since 75 years. They would have been married, and the last time I saw him was Pueblo, and I hung out with him. John Baca, I'm over here, Joe. I can't see. I know, I'm gonna help you do what you gotta do. Help me on the bus. Okay, Joe, I can help myself. Okay, Joe. But I was always there, and he just lost his wife. And when we have our meeting, Hershey lost his wife. That was Terry after 66 years. She was in the Japanese internment camp in the States at the end in World War II. But they sit alone by their, and I try to mingle with them, and the young guys, you young guys need, look at the old timers forgotten, sit by them. Don't say anything. They'll put their arm around you and you'll remember that always. And that's what they need to do. But everybody does their own thing.
Well,
But it's
sometimes
nice
they're
to
just
stay
not
in
aware.
touch with some of them, surprise them with the call, and like just talking to Francis Carmichael, who was John Finn's caretaker, and saying we're up here visiting his plaque.
Nice.
She was wonderful in his life. And now, and they're all gone. Just about all the Gold Star parents from losing their sons in the Vietnam War. There was one lady, Eleanor Wimbish. She'd leave letters for her son, Billy Sparks, William Sparks. She'd leave on a reef, and people would read them, and they'd just break. We're just here. Her husband Russ had polio in a wheelchair. I met her and I pushed him all around. Before Christmas, they lived in Glen Burnie, Maryland, and we'd set up his railroad Lionel train set. But she would always leave letters, and she left her address, and I'd respond to her, Eleanor, people read your letters, and I just want to let you know what effect they have on people. And she had been on Good Morning America and some of these morning shows, the effect on the letters she'd leave for her son on a reef at the Vietnam Wall. And then I saw her a couple years later, maybe in '84, she's walking up the road, and we just connected. We were a couple 100 feet apart. John Baca, Eleanor, and we connected, and we just hung out together. And she never got her son's Purple Heart, and I had a Purple Heart. I had her son Billy, William Stock's name engraved on it, and she invited us to her house for Mother's Day, and a bunch of us were there, and I gave her her son Purple Heart. That was beautiful.
You are amazing.
And then I stayed in touch with her daughter Mindy. Eleanor had passed away just last year, 92 years old. I wish I would have seen her one last time. We had a convention. Monsoon was my guest in Annapolis. You're going to be my date, Monsoon. It's all paid for. And we had a table of 8. It was only $1,500. And the committee who put on, they make a lot of money off the Medal of Honor convention. And I said, look, there's a Eleanor Wimbish who lives in Dunlop, Maryland, not far from Annapolis. Could some of you people go find her? Here's the address, and she'll be in a wheelchair, but bring her. I want her to sit with me in the bank. And there was a space for her, and no one went to get her. That would have been my last time seeing her alive. But I got copies of her son's letters that she left. I have them in my apartment. She'd send me copies of the letter. And we'd always get Maryland steamed crabs with Old Bay seasoning. You ever have those steamed crabs? Oh, they are so good.
Summer.
Lived in South Boston for a while. My mom worked at Albiani's restaurant, which is across from the Boston Garden. She used to wait on Chuck Connors, the Rifleman movie, and that was our favorite show. And he was playing basketball back then with the Lakers, and I think he was playing baseball with the Boston Braves or something. And some people, Nova Scotia, I reconnected with family members up in Nova Scotia. My grandfather was in the Canadian Army, came from Scotland, went in the Canadian France in 1914. And I only saw one picture of me sitting, he was a tuna fisherman. I saw a picture of him sitting on his lap when I was a young baby. And then the last time I was in Nova Scotia for my cousin Gene and his wife Kurt, for their 50th wedding anniversary, he took me to an area, the McKinney Ridges, about 12 headstones, my ancestors buried there. And I saw Bertram McKinney, and he had died August of 1969 when I was in Vietnam, and I really never got to know him. And one lady, Suzanne Sagona, who found my sister Judy living with me and Julie, and she was dying, cancer, she had to take a leg off. She hadn't seen her 3 boys for 27 years, and Suzanne found them in Minnesota, so I saved some money. She got to be with them for a week. This was 8 years ago, and then she passed away when she came back. And the boys, now they want to take care of me, but I'll visit them up in the spring, Minnesota. Until Gerald tells his wife, stop cooking for Uncle John, he's never going to leave. Or the boys, Tatum and his daughter, Tatum and Joey, his son, Mom, keep cooking for John, he'll stay forever. I rode in a couple parades with a fellow named Donald Seas. He had old 1950 T-Birds, you know, they're all convertibles. People ride in the Veterans Day or Memorial Day parades. And then I got to see him. He died of prostate cancer. I got to spend an hour with him the day before he passed away under hospice care in Claremont with his family. And he told me about Seas, his ancestors came over after the Puritans from England for, you know, they were religiously persecuted, and he settled in the colonies, 13 colonies, and his ancestors served in the Revolutionary War, they served in the Civil War, and I guess it was the great-great-grandmother, Mary Seas, in 1921 promoted Seas, started the Seas candy business. And I got hung up passing Seas lollipops to people, and I like coffee latte. But 30 in a box, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and butterscotch. No, not strawberry, coffee latte and butterscotch. So instead of sending Julian pies, I send Seas lollipops. And once in a while I get pictures. There's a home, Aurora, a senior citizen home. I send pops to God, he's been on the police force for 40 years in Denver. Henry Jones takes care of a lady named Joan. She has friends, a senior citizen. I send them pops, they're playing in their card room, whatever work, holding a Seas lollipop. And Hershey Miramora got his Medal of Honor from the Korean War. He's prisoner of war, 2.5 years. He sends me a picture, his daughter Kelly sucking on the Seas pop, working on his puzzles. And I talked to him a couple days ago. He's doing good.
Good.
This is the Army Medal of Honor. And see, I guess the Admiral at Balboa Hospital had heard I was recommended for it. My lieutenant, John Dotson, and the Leroy Lawson, and the other, they get the write-up what happened. You have to have so many witnesses to write the reason to be put in for it. But Dotson had put me in. He put it in as fast as he could so I would receive it while I was alive, because they thought for sure I'm going to be dying from my time in the hospital. But I was at a Southern California college up in Costa Mesa called Vanguard College, and the president of the college was Emil Ballier. He was my old minister from Assembly of God Church in San Diego. He would come to visit me with his violin at Balboa, and he played some of the old hymns, Great is thy faithfulness, and he hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock. He got a call. He was the president of the college when they were doing the graduation. He got a call from the Pentagon that John Baca was going to go back in 2 weeks and see Richard Nixon at the White House. And then I was the most popular guy on campus. And then I bought my mom the dress, J.C. Penney's, for the presentation. She wore it. My sisters were there, and my stepdad, and there were 7 Medal of Honors presented, and I was the low rank of the Army. They made me a buck sergeant, E5. And my mom had a nice conversation with Richard Nixon's wife. And Richard Nixon's birthday is the same day as Monsoon, January 9th. I'd send him birthday cards, but he'd never respond back. But he was nice, and then, well, a year and a half later, I buried my mom in that same dress, January of '73, here at El Camino Cemetery. And I go visit her and spend time with her. And it's like when you bring a dog to a headstone area, they know it was a family member, and they'll sit right next to it. But it was wonderful them flying my mom to Japan. She's trying to be a mom to other people, and I said, Mom, you can't do that. Because some of those people died. They would wake up middle of the night screaming. We knew it was their last breath, and we couldn't get out of bed to hold their hand. And you wondered why weren't their parents there at their bedside? And there was a Japanese lady, a wealthy lady, drove a Rolls Royce. She befriended my mom, Mrs. Omada. She befriended my mom, took her in, and she would visit the wounded with my mom too. Because a lot of the guys had no, some guy, some admiral or a colonel or comes in, Army colonel, the guy had no legs, he pins a Purple Heart on his pillow, and I whispered, why don't you give him his legs back, you know, instead of the Purple Heart. But
You had mentioned to me that Psalm 91 is your favorite. Psalm 91?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's with the I always felt like an angel holding me the night I was dying, and it was so peaceful. And Suzanne Sagona, she's been the longest volunteer at the Vietnam Memorial from Denver, goes Memorial Day, Veterans Day. She's the one who found my sister's boys, and she's the one who got that was taken in Billings, Montana. Then she put the 91st Psalm in the back, and I send her $100, send me some more cards. I ended up getting close to 1,000 from the Netherlands. So if you needed any cards, I got a whole lot.
Good to know.
But I finished what I'm saying long before I quit talking.